I think obviously knowing, some of, your history as far as substance abuse.
A little bit of qualifying, yeah.
And then, what your life is like now.
We're also trying to reach to the community to get involved.
Right. One of the therapists that I talked to in the course of what I've been doing for the last few months says that anybody under 30 has fairly significant religious trauma. And that doesn't mean they were touched funny by a priest.
Right.
What it means is the world they grew up in, the religion they were exposed to, was mostly a power structure intent on maintaining its power mostly through fear and not promoting peace and love and connection to a higher power or whatever. And so they want nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
And then and then 80% of the people in the 12-step rooms drag their church experience into their 12-step meetings, and they if they act like if you don't believe in God, you're just being obstinate, as opposed to it just doesn't speak to me. There's no part of that message that speaks to me.
Right.
And so,
The same way about churches.
Right. Oh, we went to church 10 years ago, 12 years ago. We went around looking for a spiritual home that we could take our kids to that wasn't full of sick alcoholics, and they just weren't very welcoming. Even the ones that were nice and that were kind of on point in terms of the message they were putting out, from the pulpit and stuff. We'd stand around for a month every Sunday and nobody would talk to us. That's fucking weird. Great.
It is a little strange.
Because I'm used to a community when a stranger shows up, everybody walks over and goes, "Hi, glad you're here."
Welcome.
And it's my problem was, even if I found one that felt welcoming, I felt a little bit like I was being dishonest because I don't believe in Jesus. Mm-hmm. And it seems like the central reason that they're gathering I don't have, and try to use it for all the other stuff when I don't believe what you believe. That seems like a little, and what I understand is a third of the people in most churches don't believe that either, but they need a social group and they need an outlet, and great, that's fine, but the religion I grew up in was very welcoming and very groovy and peace, and Presbyterian is very kind of mushy. There's no devil. They were very wonderful people. I distanced myself from it because I couldn't be like them. It annoyed me how happy they were. And so I left. But that part of the 12-step thing is a lot of people just aren't going anymore because it feels like Jesus. And everybody's talking about God all the time, and a lot of the people these days don't have the resources that I had 25 years ago to wade through all that and find something that works.
Well, don't you think COVID had something to do with, because you're saying they're not attending the groups like they were back then?
Well, that started well before COVID, but COVID accelerated it quite a bit too. I have a friend in California who says if something doesn't change, AA in Southern California will be dead in a decade because the rooms are full of people with time not sharing their experience about what they do, but telling you what you need to do. Yeah. And being real preachy and real gaudy, and all the young people go, "Fuck it, I'm not going."
Yeah, that was too much.
So.
It didn't bother me. I found it entertaining. But I was like, look.
I could barely manage it when I started.
The real reason I stopped going is because I drink a beer here and there, and I was like, I'm not going to go to AA.
That's exactly one of my friends was bemoaning the fact that he feels judged when he goes to AA or NA meetings. I'm going, but dude, you smoke pot all day, every day. Why are you there? And ultimately, why he's there is because he misses the community. It's that's not a reason to go.
Yeah.
That's not And I think that 20% of the people in most 12-step fellowships who are staying sober long-term aren't really addicts or alcoholics. Mm. They're people who are having a problem with drugs and alcohol and probably needed to stop. But think about it. In 2023 America, where is there that you can show up uninvited as a stranger and people go, "Oh, hey man, we're glad you're here. Come on in, here's some coffee. And we'll listen to your bullshit and we'll try and help you make your life better." Where is there? Nowhere. So they come in and they sit down and they stay, but they don't have wrong with them what I have wrong with me. And without meaning to, they set an example that will kill someone like me. And so I have to be very careful about that too. I'm the real deal.
That's real. That's really real.
Just turn it over to God. Just turn it over to God. They're like, these people, it's like if you ask them what their actual program looks like on a daily basis, they don't have one. Mm-hmm. They pray a little and they go to a lot of meetings. They hang out with sober people. Mm-hmm. And that's neat, but it doesn't lead. I couldn't stay sober doing that, and it definitely wouldn't give me the tools to build the kind of life I want.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, I mean, probably my best friend, is probably is Todd, and he just, and I don't sit around trying to bullshit with him. I tell, he knows what I do, and like.
I don't have any judgment, man. If I thought I could smoke a little weed or drink a beer now and then it'd be okay, I'd totally do that. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't go to AA anymore. I'd still probably use the tools.
Right.
But that's.
I definitely use the tools because there's some. I mean,
well, they're just good. It's just a good way to approach life, But it's it's just. And I figured out something that works for me, and I'm trying to figure out a way to talk to people about it, so that they don't have to figure it out for themselves. That's kind of what I'm about these days.
Mm-hmm. What are you calling it?
I don't fucking know.
Well, I mean. Big Cool Life.
Right.
I remember, I'm sure it wasn't the first time that it came up when I was in Austin recovery, but it sounded cool when I first heard it, which was when I was in Austin recovery, February 2019 when I first stepped foot in there. But, I think that's great.
Well, that's it. I didn't get sober to be sober. I got sober to have a big, cool life. Sober was just the first thing I had to learn how to do. And then I've got this whole, right now I'm calling it the mechanics of spirituality. I don't know if you want me to talk about how I got, my little bit of my backstory, if you want me to do that bit too. But so,
promote you.
I was born in Austin. I'm a happy little kid. I look back now, and the spiritual malady first presented on the first day of first grade when I had to go to school, and there was a bunch of kids at school, and they made me uncomfortable being around all those other kids, and so I started eating. Food was the way I dealt with it first. And I knew I wanted to be a musician when I was 7 years old, and I saw the Rolling Stones on television, and I knew I wanted to be in a rock band, and I grew up right by the UT campus, and I'm mowing yards and buying records, and it's the late 60s, and I started going to concerts when I'm 12 in middle school by myself. And they're passing around a lot of joints. And after the second or third, by the second or third concert, they seemed like nice people. And so I figured I'd try a little bit. And that was the best concert of all. And wow, look, this is way better than food. And, being 1974, it was not hard to find weed. And so I'm smoking a lot of weed in high school and going to a lot of concerts and trying to learn to play the guitar and still eating. And
what high school?
I went to Lamar Middle School in McAllen back in the 70s. And I get to high school and I'm smoking weed and I start drinking age is 18. By the time I'm 15, I have long hair and a beard and I'm 6 feet tall and weigh 200 pounds. It's really not hard to get alcohol. But it's fine. It's still working. Like I know people who are out of control by, 14 or something. Like that's not my story. I drank and I used for a long time and it was totally fun. And then I discover skateboarding and I find some weirdos to hang out with and I graduate from high school. And between the time I graduated from high school and the day I started college in 1979, I discovered punk rock. I cut off all my hair and I formed my first band and we started playing a bunch of shows and I'm going to school and I'm playing in this band and things are going great. And everybody there is weirdo like me and drinking a lot of beer and smoking a lot of weed. And there's guys over on the edges of the scene who are doing a lot of meth, but they make me uncomfortable. But by the time I'm 21, I'm drinking so much that I'm passing out. And I had gotten to know the guys doing the meth and they weren't bad people. So my solution to the drinking too much wasn't drink less. It was just start doing meth so I don't pass out, And very quickly it's dealing meth, because why wouldn't you? And First band in, second band, both my first two bands do well and are making records and are touring the country and we're doing all right. And I'm in LA in 1985 and the punk scene's getting a little tedious. And I run into friends who used to be in a punk band who've now grown out their hair and they're starting a rock band and invite me to their first show. And I go see their first show in this basement. And Guns N' Roses also played at the party at their third or fourth show. And I went, I'm moving to LA and start a rock band. And so I came back to Texas and packed my stuff up eventually and moved out to LA. And it was kind of like middle school all over where like, you know, everybody's skinny and looks like Aerosmith and I show up looking like me and definitely not going to wear spandex. And I've been balding since high school, so hairband's not part of the deal. So, but I managed to put together a band, get a record deal, and meet a beautiful little goth girl who had the best meth I'd ever done in my life. And, you know, within a month we're living together, and within 2 months we're dealing and, you know, and get a record deal, make records, videos on MTV, the whole 9 yards. Eventually, meth becomes heroin because, you know, I'd been up for a long time and could use a nap. And you know, everybody out there was strung out, everybody. And you know, eventually the record deal ended because Nirvana. And I mean, my band wasn't like Poison. We were more like Motorhead meets ZZ Top. But
how many countries did you go to?
With that band, I mean, we did Europe and we did Japan and, you know, and it was fun. We got to tour, open for a lot of big people and stuff. It was great. But once the band ended, I looked around after a while and realized, like, I'm in no shape to start another band, and I have this job that's paying me enough to where I can afford to use forever, and that scared me. Because, like I don't believe in God, but I had this philosophy for life that was, I don't pray for parking spaces. And what that meant was I take care of business and good stuff comes to me before I even know I need it. And that had been the story of my entire life. And as soon as I started doing heroin, I knew that deal was off and I wasn't wrong. And I didn't think I could get sober in LA. Nobody I knew there was no recovery in the world I was in yet. And so I thought, well, I'll get out of LA. I'll go back to Texas where there isn't heroin. And who knew? Who knew? So I packed up my crap and my girlfriend and, you know, drove to Texas. Took 4 days because, you know, heroin's not a good cross-country drug. And then we got here and we detoxed.
In Austin?
Yeah. We bought a bunch of pills in LA so that when we got here we could take the pills and detox. They used to be able to get this pill called Darvon. 1 milligram pill of Darvon with 1 milligram of methadone. And so you could buy 200 of them and take 30 the first day and 29 the second day and
1 milligram or 10?
1 milligram.
Okay.
It's super, like it was a pain medicine back in the 80s. And so like we brought a shitload of them and we detoxed ourselves and it was fine. And then 2 weeks after we were clean,
there it is.
My girlfriend, like, she snapped and had to be hospitalized. They thought she had taken too much of a drug and what she was on was untreated malady. And her brain broke.
Yeah.
And she had to be sedated for a couple of days. And when she got out of the hospital, we brushed off our Spanish and we headed for Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, which you can do in any city. Yeah. And within a couple of hours, we had found what we needed. And once moving didn't fix anything, all bets were off. Like,
was the dope better here than LA?
Oh, 100% no.
The best dope I ever did was in LA, for sure.
It was more expensive and shittier. It was unbelievable how bad it was. And, well, initially, the dope white people could get. And, you know, I was always the junkie that people would call, right? Like, I'm the most together drug addict. You know, you have a problem, call Chris, he'll help you figure it out, whatever. But, like, once moving didn't fix anything, that was over. And I became reckless, and I didn't care if I lived or died, so I didn't care if you lived or died. And, you know, I got involved in some shady shit, and I overdosed 4 times and died, and was brought back by roommates and paramedics and whatever. And you know, eventually I met, you know, because I didn't look like your typical junkie, they always thought I was a cop if they didn't know me because I was a big dude, you know.
White heroin addict.
Well, I'm white and I'm not skinny and I'm not shady as fuck, you know. And so they look at me, they thought I was a cop. And I'm like, I'll use right here in front of you. But because of that, like, I'd get to know him, and then I would take the white dude who's dealing to pick up the dope, and I'd get to be buddies with his guy, and then I'd just go to his guy, and then I get to be buddies with his guy, and then I could get the actual stuff coming in before they were stepping on it. And that's what that, you know, because that's who I am. But, you know, I spent every day trying to quit the last 2 years, and I failed over and over and over and over again. And ultimately, and I found a way to go to treatment, and that was awesome. I got a couple of gifts along the way. One was like, I had this moment of clarity where I'm sitting at my desk, and the only way I really relate with my dad, like, I keep my dad away from me. He's here in town, but I don't let him see me because he doesn't know what's going on, but he knows I'm not right. But once every month or so, I pick him up and we go shooting. And I'm putting some sights on this target pistol he bought. And my dealer shows up at my house, and I find myself sitting at a desk with a gun in one hand and a syringe in the other, trying to decide which one to use. And for just a minute, it's like I'm across the room looking at my own back going, how the hell did those get to be the only choices? I mean, they are the only choices. But I used to have this big fucking life, and now it's that? Like, there has to be a way to live, and I don't know what it is. And then later that day, I'm flip channel surfing, and I run across this story on 2020 about this musician who's now sober and who's put together an organization whose only purpose is to pay for musicians to get treatment. And I go, oh shit, that's my shot. And I write down their info and I work with them, and it took a minute because I still had plans. But they put me in touch with the treatment center. I call the treatment center. They find out I'm on methadone. They say, oh, we can't take you on methadone. Stop taking the methadone. We'll see you in 6 weeks. And what they were really saying without saying it was, go back to heroin use because that's a detox we can manage. You know, if you come in here and go straight off the methadone, you'll be so sick the whole time you're here you won't get anything out of it.
I've been there.
And so I did, and that was a gift because it showed me how ugly my life was. And then my girlfriend, on and off again girlfriend, we kept splitting up because we were dying together, but you know, we couldn't seem to stay apart, you know that. And well, just we kept seeing each other in the same parking lots. And she came to me and she said, look, you need to think about why you're going. Like, we didn't know anybody that had gone to rehab yet. And she said, you need to think about why you're going because you've been dead a bunch lately. And I'm afraid if you go for the wrong reason, next time you're going to stay dead, and I'd hate to see that. And so I sat down and went, why am I going? Am I going because I got more warrants than I can count, and every time I walk out my front door, I'm committing a felony, and I'm putting myself in harm's way all day, every day, and I'm overdosing and dying on a regular basis, and my life is a complete miserable shit? Is that why I'm going? Or am I going because I believe these people who do this for a living are going to be able to explain to me how to go to the grocery store and have a job without needing so much opiates in my system that I'm going into respiratory arrest? Okay, that's why I'm going. Not all the rest of that crap, which is good because I see a lot of people who say they want to be sober, but as soon as the fires go out, they use again. And if manageability is what you're trying to get back, more power to you. But I'm glad she asked the question because it cleared that up before I ever got there. You know, then I got there and they started, I didn't know 12-step was going to be a part, which didn't give me a chance to work up an argument. And I start going into these meetings and I had a lot of animosity towards religion and God and all the rest of it. I had grown up a punk rocker during the moral majority Reagan administration, like I didn't have anything to do with any of it. But underneath the anger and the rest of it, the simple truth was nothing about God spoke to me. It had no resonance. It never has. I'm not being difficult. It doesn't speak to me. And they would say, well, just fake it till you make it. And I was going, why don't I pretend to be high? You know, fuck you. I don't think that's a thing. Even we agnostics in the big book is basically saying, well, you'll believe in a minute. I'm going, fuck you. No, I won't. What do I do? And, you know, 70% of my life is spent doing things nobody else has interest in, and I'm totally happy with that. But 30% of my life was always spent watching people who weren't smarter than me and who didn't have more resources than me, have an easier time than me at things that I just couldn't seem to do. And I'm going, great, this is another one of those. I believe this works, but it's not going to work for me because I can't. And then somebody there just sat me down and he helped me understand the powerlessness. It's not, people say powerless over everything. That's horseshit. It's not true. Otherwise I could never do anything that made a difference, and this is not true. Mm-hmm. And people like to say they're powerless over people, places, and things, which is true, but irrelevant, because so's everyone, addict or not. I'm also powerless over human flight. but
we can get rid of the people, places, and things, right?
Well, sure, because that means I'm not powerless. I cannot have you around me. Exactly. Not powerless. I have the ability to take action. Powerless means the inability to take effective action. Mm-hmm. That's powerless. And but with drugs and alcohol, what the guy explained to me is 9 out of 10 people have 100% control 100% of the time over how much they use when they use. And I don't.
Yeah, no, I'll powerless over that.
And most people, there are a few people, especially around alcohol, if they put any in their body, it's just insanity from the word go. But for most people, that's not really the truth. For most of us, we can get away with a little bit here and there for a minute.
Yeah.
But it's rolling dice.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Sometimes I want to go out and have a couple of drinks, and I do. And other times I want to go out and have a couple of drinks, and I end up spending 5 days in a hotel room shooting dope and smoking crack with a girl whose name I never quite got. And I just wanted a couple of drinks. What the hell? And because I'm an addict, I ask the wrong question. I always ask, why can't it go like the time when it was 2 and it worked? They're like, but that's meaningless, because if it could go like that, it would go like that. But I ask that question so I don't have to ask the more difficult question, which is, why do I keep trying to make it go like that when it keeps going like this? And that's scary, because what I'm really having to admit is that I can never really safely again use the only thing I've ever found that makes being me doable. Drugs and alcohol were how I functioned in the world. And it took more and more drugs and alcohol for me to either be okay with me or pretend I was somebody else. Right up until, it took so much that it killed me over and over again. But he had me look at my history and go, okay, yeah, I can't 100% of the time control how much I take. I can't. And then he explained to me the unmanageability is not the chaos in my life. That's not unmanageability, that's delusion. You can't do the crap we do and not have the consequences we face. That the unmanageability is this mental obsession piece. This when I make a decision to stop, I can't manage that decision. From the minute I stop, my brain starts trying to convince me of a way to pick up again. And eventually it finds a story I like, and I do. Or I run out of stories and I just get to fuck it. And I pick up again. Not because I'm stupid, not because I don't know exactly what's going to happen. Like, they say insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. But really for us, the insanity is doing the same thing over and over, knowing exactly what's going to happen. Doing it anyway. And the reason I do that is because tomorrow's misery isn't happening right now. And it feels like somebody's holding my head underwater. And I can't breathe. And I have to breathe. And maybe it won't happen, or maybe I'll die, or maybe I don't care. Right now, I have to breathe. And as soon as I put it in me, I'm screwed again. And he helped me look at that and went, oh, I got both of those. There's not any argument about those. I'm smart, I'm intelligent, I'm strong, and I cannot do this. And I cannot stop on my own. And then my understanding of spirituality and kind of what I'm trying to bring out into the world now. The second step in AA is what it's asking really is not that I believe in God, but that do I believe that a connection to some sort of spiritual power can remove the mental obsession so I can stay sober without it being a struggle. That's really what it's asking. Which for me required a different way of thinking about spirituality. And really what that boils down to, and kind of what I'm trying to put out there into the world, is I believe every human being has a spirit. Doesn't have to be anything religious about that at all. It's a part of me that's not just the meat. You know, I saw this great article where 20 years ago, a philosopher and a computer scientist made a bet that they would be able to create consciousness in a computer in 20 years. And this computer scientist lost. And I think the reason for that is you can reproduce the mechanics all you want. But it's like building a better and better and better radio and being unaware that there's a radio station. Like, you can understand the radio all the way down to the atoms, and unless you know that it's picking up a signal from outside itself, you won't understand what's happening. So I have a spirit, you have a spirit, we all have a spirit. And the reason I was so fucked my whole life is because no matter how I tried to solve the problem of Chris, like it's a math equation, and no matter how many different ways I worked the equation, I can't make it fucking balance. It's because there was a variable that was hidden, and that variable is spiritual health. I have spiritual health just like I have mental health and physical health. Also nothing religious about that. You can be religious, it's not flying in the face of that at all. It doesn't have anything to do with that. Why understanding my spiritual health matters is because my thinking, and yours and everybody's, is almost entirely the product of the spiritual health I'm in while I'm thinking. And my actions and my emotions are driven by my thoughts. When I'm in poor spiritual health, I am miserable inside and everything gets filtered through it. And my thinking, it tends to be selfish and frightened and self-centered and dishonest whenever necessary. And of course it is. You know, solving the problem for me is number one on my to-do list, whether I'm an addict or not. But as I build my spiritual health, using a specific set of tools that do that don't require belief, just action, my thinking gets better. My actions become more effective. My emotions become in proportion to what's going on. And as long as I can continue to look at how I'm interfacing with the world and understand that my spiritual health has to be considered in every equation, in every situation. Because there are areas that are easy to handle. And there are other areas where I can't show up and be the person I think I'm supposed to be. Like I walk away from it feeling bad about how I showed up. And that's because I don't have the spiritual health to show up right yet. But there are tools I can use, the inventory tool in particular, to get a vision of what it would look like if I were spiritually healthy enough. And then I can make a commitment to go out and try and do that and lean into my spiritual connection until I can do it without it being a strain. Just like building physical health. No amount of spiritual health will fix my trauma. No amount of spiritual health will fix my mood disorder that requires medication. No amount of spiritual health will fix my physical health. God is not the answer to everything. Spiritual health is not the answer to everything, but without it, I'm never going to be where I need to be on the other two. And that's what the actions of the program, the beauty of these actions, particularly the inventory process, meditation and prayer or setting of intentions or however you want to think about that, and trying to be useful to people around you. Those tools, by their nature, clear a path and let the signal come in and let me build my spiritual health and give me clear instructions on how the growth needs to happen.
Since COVID and how that's changed, for a while, just changed everything. And, the job market and, things like that. When that hit you, like it hit all of us in some type of way, did it shake you at all to where you had to really go back to the roots of your AA and talk to your sponsor and so basically my question is, did you have a hard time getting through the COVID?
My hard time during the COVID thing and other people's hard times were different. And that's because, I'm a bit of an introvert anyway, right? I like my alone time. And those of us who are introverts, when the lockdown happened, we went, perfect, I'm built for this shit. And we locked down and it was awesome. Now also, 80+% of my recovery is not based on the community. It's not based on meetings or any of the rest of that stuff. It's based on the actions I take on a daily basis. So that wasn't affected at all. I know a lot of people for whom the bulk of their recovery was socially based, and those people kind of lost their minds on the front end. And some of them relapsed, and some of them went, oh shit, I don't have a daily practice, I should probably do that. And others of them went, fuck it, I'm going back in person, I don't care how dangerous it is, and whatever they needed to do. I mean, one of the meetings I go to now was started by a guy that had just gotten out of AR 3 months before the lockdown. And less than a month into the lockdown, he went, I can't do the Zoom. I can't do it. So he started a meeting with the guys in his sober house and his sponsor at a park outdoors. And that meeting is still happening.
I think I remember hearing about that.
There were a bunch of them for a while. This one's still going because it's a great meeting.
Not the one at the base at Craigsfield.
No, this was at Marymore Seawright. Okay. But so the place where I ran into trouble, and where a bunch of other people wired like me ran into trouble, is I think I'm fine alone. And I'm not socializing. And Zoom meetings are great, but Zoom meetings are kind of like watching porn. Like, it reminds me of how awesome it is, but I don't get to actually experience it. It's like, and I need reminding, but it's really not the same as sitting in a room full of people gathered together for unselfish reasons. It's just not the same. So, but I think I'm fine because I like, my motto is that it's not that I don't like people, it's that I tend to feel better when they're not around. And so where I ran into trouble was that I stayed alone too long. And I started getting really fucking weird because no amount of daily practice can fill my social instinct. I have to be around people. And at some point it became very like, oh crap, and I had to start venturing out and finding ways to do that.
Weird, or are you like, you were recognizing that your thoughts were not right?
Right, yeah. And no matter how hard, well, not hard, no matter how diligently I applied the tools on a daily basis, I was not getting the same results. It's like no matter how, I couldn't stay even. I was more likely to snap at my beautiful wife who hadn't done anything different than she ever does because I'm just barely keeping head above water. And it's because I don't always recognize when I need to go be social. And so I had to get back, but yeah, I know a lot of people, especially people who are, an extrovert is just someone who gets recharged in a group. And an introvert is somebody who gets recharged alone. And like, I love being around people, but it wears me out. And I know people who are worn out unless they can be around people. Mm-hmm. And those people, it freaked them out on the front end, but they were smart enough to do something about it. And it took me a little longer to realize that what I'm doing is not working. And the real challenge that the pandemic didn't cause, it accelerated, both in the recovery community, but just in the culture at large, right? And this is a whole other talk, but the idea that my children need to have a better life than me never existed prior to World War II. But coming out of World War II, two things happened. One, all the people coming out of the war were also coming out of the Depression and having grown up through all of that. And then you had the rise of the middle class because of all the industrialization that happened during the war. And suddenly you have these people who have more money than they had and more free time than they had who are trying to make sure their kids don't have to suffer. And the baby boomers grew up being treated like they were the most important person in the house, and they grew up as I won't say self-centered, I'll say self-focused generation that's ever existed. And then they grew up and had kids, and having kids requires that you be unselfish, and they weren't all into that. Yeah. And so sometimes they try to be friends with their kids rather than parents, and their kids grew up to be Gen X people who were even more self-focused and more spiritually adrift because of it. And every generation is a little bit more spiritually adrift than the one before it. And all our social connections are breaking down because when I am cut off from my spiritual health, I'm also cut off from you and the planet and everything else. And I just can't feel you. And what's the point? It just feels expensive being around you because you're self-centered too. And families broke down and cultural groups broke down and everybody started feeling more and more alone. And then the pandemic hit.
So you feel like because of spiritual health is the reason that each generation is getting worse and worse?
Well, the accidental byproduct of the progress of I can't even say the term that people use, self-empowerment and the rest of all this stuff that's been happening since the 60s and 70s and stuff, is that each generation has also become a little bit more spiritually adrift. I mean, families didn't break down because society became fluid. Families broke down because 5 selfish people in a house is easy to walk away from. Like a family used to be a unit full of people who wanted things for each other, not from each other. But if I'm thinking about me all the time, then you're just irritating if you make me think about you. And that's easy to fuck. Divorces happen more. I'm distanced from my family because it's not feeding me. And the church community is not feeding me, and everything's not feeding me. And pretty soon I feel alone. And every generation everybody gets a little worse as time goes on. And now it's as bad as it's ever been. And it's like, and the hope in the situation. I heard Eckhart Tolle once speak about how at one point in the history of the earth, there were no flowering plants. It was all ferns, right? And then one plant species began to flower, and it made no evolutionary advantage whatsoever. But over the course of about 100 million years, it went from one plant flowering to about 7 or 8% of the plants began to flower. And then in a 10 million year period, it went from 7% to 85%. Because the tipping point was 7%. Not 80%, 7%. And there are these pockets of people, 12-step community is one of them, of people who are trying to find a spiritual center again. And people who are trying to build spiritual communities full of people who want things for each other, not from each other. And it's in early stages. And parts of the yoga community can be that way. And there are other little communities that are that, and they're here and there. And it's 3% or 2%. But think about 7% is 1 in 12, I think. Something like that. 8%, maybe 1 in 12, right? Mm-hmm. If 1 in 12 people is living a life based on not just principles, but actions that allow them to be happy and focused on supporting other people, and they can do that in a reproducible manner because they know how to do it, then 2 or 3 other people of the 12 are going to go, how come you're fucking happy and I'm not? And then those 3 people, well, maybe 2 of them will go, okay, I'll do that too. And now you've got 3 and 12. And then you've got 6 and 12. And things are ugly now. Culturally, things are ugly. Yeah. It doesn't matter right or left. It's all fear, right? But fear at the right end of the political spectrum is turning into anger, and fear on the left end of the political spectrum is turning into despair, which is less effective, but it's still fear. It's just fear. And they're trying to find a place to point it, and they're pointing it at each other.
Yeah, and so fear and selfishness, I mean, these are just things, are coming to my mind right now of maybe just 2 reasons of why things are so bad right now. I was thinking, we might need, we all need to lift each other up. Like, we need our leaders, and not political leaders and things like that necessarily, but just community leaders,
Well, and it has to start at the bottom. We can't wait for the leaders.
Right.
And it's like, but if we do what we can.
Like neighborhood leaders or,
right,
or whatever.
Or just whatever the community I'm in. If I can be the 1 in 12, if each one of us can be the 1 in 12, then, and we know why we're good, so that we can explain to other people why we're good. Mm-hmm. Not just, I believe in Jesus. Maybe it is that, but then what? Because it has to be more than belief. It has to be, what do I do? Because people are hopeless and they're angry and they're lashing out. And I think you can take what happened to me at the personal, sort of microscopic spiritual level and expand it out to the cultural level, and it explains what's going on now. And it explains things like Germany in 1930, where happy men who loved their wives and kids fell into lockstep behind a genocidal maniac like Hitler. you know, or Cambodia in 1968, or Russia in 1907. Like, these are cultures who had completely lost their way, and somebody showed up and said, I have an answer, and it's not a good answer, but it's the only answer we got, so we do it. And it's awful. And, you know, you substitute Hitler for heroin, and it's remarkably similar. But I do believe that the same thing can happen on a cultural level. But I also believe that I may need to buy a compound before then, you know, something. I may need to move somewhere with a defensible perimeter. But it's why addiction has gotten so bad, and it's why hopelessness has gotten so bad. And it's just really important that I try to be the 1 in 12, you know, I don't know, that's where the hope comes in.
And are you writing a book or a paper?
Well, the plan is, as my health gets better, sometime in the next week or 10 days, just before the pandemic started, I had started doing 3 or 4 times a week, just putting out these little like 3-minute videos on how I'm practicing you know, ideas about spirituality that are coming to my head. So that's getting ready to start happening, to just sort of put the general ideas out there. I am working on a book. I've got a buddy, I've got access to a literary agent, and they've told me what I need to write so that they can go get me in advance to write a book. And so I'm working on that. Like, the guy who was my sponsor, who also has a book that's on the bestseller list, you know, asked me, like, are you writing a book for people in recovery, or are you writing a book? And I went, oh, I think I'm writing a book. I can write for people in recovery too, but I think I'm just writing a book, right? And to his point, at one point, because I keep going like, I can't be that guy. Like, I can't be I can't be that guy. And I don't, you know.
You can't be God. They're God.
Well, no, but it's like, but I can't imagine myself in like a role as a person who has a lot of, like, I can't imagine like.
That's the pulpit.
Right, yeah, or, you know, Eckhart Tolle or Deepak Chopra. I can't imagine, but like, my sponsor, you know, he's very smart. And he went, there's 350 million people in this country. I said, right. I said, 10% of that is 35 million. 1% is 3.5 million. Right. 0.1% is 350,000. Right. 0.01% is 35,000. Do you think 0.01% of the people in this country might resonate with your particular approach? And I went, oh, fuck you. You know, because the way I think isn't like other people. But there are people who are never going to hear those other people, who are carrying a wonderful message, but it just isn't going to resonate with some people. And mine might. And so it's my job to put it out there.
Absolutely.
You know, I had this conversation with these people from, one of them was a Buddhist monk and the other one was a Hindu guy. And like, we were talking about humility. And one of the guys brought up what he called the other part of humility. I was talking to some guys about this yesterday. Most people, when they say humble, they mean small. But humble doesn't mean small, it means right-sized. I mean, in step 7 in the 12 steps, the reason I'm humbly asking a higher power to remove my shortcomings is because I'm admitting that by myself, without spiritual help, I can't make them go away. That's right-sized. But the other part of humility is every single person is born with a talent. Something that's so easy for you that it's hard to identify it as a talent. Mm-hmm. But when you do it, your friends go, how did you do that? Mm-hmm. It's hard to take it seriously.
How could you not?
Right, that's exactly it. How could you, this is stupid, this is like, yeah. That's what a talent really is.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, it's only people in the 12-step world who get to a place, who can move from this place of dependence on everything outside of them trying to go a certain way to be okay, into a place of independence where they're depending on a connection to spiritual power and their own actions to fill their needs. And once you get to that place through daily practice for a while, then you have the bandwidth to start asking, what is that thing about me and how do I develop it for the betterment of myself and the world? And there's no better place to be than to know what that thing is about you.
That daily practice is essential into having the life that you want. I mean, whether it's recovery. I mean,
Yeah. Spiritual health just has to be just like physical health. I have to brush my teeth every day because the fact that I brushed them 3 days ago doesn't help today. And I have to eat healthy today because yesterday's food will not feed my body today. And I have to take care of my mental health today. I have to take my psych meds today because if I don't, depression is going to happen again.
And doing that shows other people that you got to get out of bed and take your psych meds.
Right. And if I take one of my things is you got to know your truth. What is my truth? Big picture truth, not just like my truth is I have severe substance use disorder. I cannot safely use anything without medical assistance. Like for me, abstinence isn't never taking any drug again, ever. It's never taking anything without a doctor involved. I no longer get to self-prescribe anything. And I also don't get to decide what I don't take. I have to talk to if my meds aren't working, I got to talk to my doc about changing, not just decide I'm not taking them. That's what abstinence is for me. If you stay sober any length of time, you're going to have surgery, you're going to need pain meds, you can't be afraid of that. But I've got to know my whole truth. I have substance use disorder. I also have chronic depression that occasionally requires medication. Not always, but every once in a while it gets to a place where it's not passing and I need some help. I'm also on the Asperger's spectrum. I need to know that because it affects how I interact with the world. Because how I perceive the world is different than other people. And I can't get mad at them for not seeing it my way, and I can't be confused at I have to interact with the world based on reality. Those are givens. And I also have chronic health issues that are never going away and are going to have to require my attention. That's my truth, my whole truth.
But you're also continuing to lose weight.
Working on it.
I mean, dude.
When I first got sick, when I got sober, I weighed 285. 10 years later, I weighed 385.
Yes.
Because I kept confusing the light in the refrigerator for the sunlight of the spirit. And then I tried everything I could for 5 years, just like trying to get sober. Everything I could, nutritionists, exercise, everything. There was one point when I was working out for 2 hours, 7 days a week. I was eating 1,400 calories a day and I was not losing weight. And my nutritionist put me on 700 calories a day and I began to lose weight. And what she said was, this is not sustainable. You need to get gastric sleeve surgery. Your body will not do it on its own. And so I did, and I dropped 135 pounds.
Wow.
And then, what was the lowest you got down to?
Well, I started, when I had the surgery, I weighed 365. I got down to 255. Because of some of the meds I've been on with the long COVID, that bumped back up to 280. Now I'm back down to 255 again.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe 250.
Yeah, how I'd like to be 225, but I'm 62 years old. That may not happen again.
I think I left the treatment center
and I was probably still 365,
I think March. I was there for like 3.5 months, during February, March, April, May, June. I left in June of 2019, and you were losing weight.
Okay,
you weren't down to 255.
No. But it's important, because I can't ignore, like if I have trauma, especially abuse and stuff like that, and I don't get help from a trained professional, that trauma will grind me down spiritually and I'll end up loaded again. If I don't deal with my mood disorders, if I have ADHD or bipolar 2 or whatever else, if I don't deal with things that can be managed through meds, it will spin me off and I'll end up loaded again. That's part of knowing my truth is I can admit my truth, but the only way I can accept my truth is to understand the consequences of not accepting my truth and basing my action on it.
I think there's a huge difference between a lot of people's views because they don't think you should take medication.
Yeah. And show me your medical credentials and we'll talk.
Yeah.
I
like that.
Usually the people who are super antidepressants really fucking need an antidepressant.
I like that.
You got it. I'll tell you about it afterwards. Some of the comments that were made on one of my videos.
But it's like, in the 80s, when antidepressants started happening, people in AA and NA, especially NA, started telling you weren't sober on those pills and people would stop taking them and commit suicide. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people are dead because they were trying to be good members of a fellowship. Fuck that. You're not my doctor. And it's not cheating.
I've heard
You know.
people Not even that long ago.
Now we're doing that, and it's gotten way better in the last, because 10 years ago, I would have argued about Matt, but I don't anymore, because things got bad. And like, my experience with Matt was methadone, and it's horse shit, and it's not designed to help. Like, I mean, the truth is, harm reduction, when the concept started, was reduction in crime. That's what it was. It was harm reduction for society, not for the people on the methadone. And so, like, harm reduction is great. What's the plan? Because letting me stay sick isn't helpful. Yeah. And supporting me in my sickness doesn't get me motivated to get better. It just lets me stay sick. And so there has to be more to it than just giving me a fucking med. But I also believe, like we talked about earlier, if a long-term chronic relapsing opiate addict, especially in this environment where you don't even know you can't even find heroin anymore, it's all fentanyl. Oh, yeah. And so in this, like, if we get them on Suboxone and we can get them on the right dose, because a lot of the prescribers are giving them too much, and that'll just make them want to think about the Suboxone all the time. If you give them too little, they'll go get high. But if we can get the dose right, they can lean into the spiritual tools to build spiritual health so they can have an actual life. I don't have an opinion about the drug itself. How it's being administered is an issue sometimes.
The thing that I've seen the most with methadone, especially with the homeless community, is that they're not really using it to help them get clean and sober. They're using it to stay alive. It brings their tolerance up high enough that they can take fentanyl or shoot fentanyl and not die.
Right.
If they didn't have the methadone and they did what they were doing, they would just die.
Sure.
Right. But it's not dealing with the problem. You know, and I know you can't get somebody sober and happy who's dead, but once again, it's like, and the fentanyl's only a tiny piece of the equation right now. It's like, I just read this amazing book called The Least of Us by a guy named Sam Quinones. He wrote a great book called Dreamland about the opioid epidemic back in 2016. And this picks up where that left off, talking about how the cartels made the switch from heroin into fentanyl. And really, the switch came not because of fentanyl, but because of meth. Because when the United States made ephedrine almost impossible to get, all the bikers who were making the speed in the Southwest couldn't make it anymore. But you could still get ephedrine in Mexico. So the cartels set up a legit chemical manufacturing lab in order to make meth.
I almost felt the same on ephedrine as I did a little bump of meth.
Right.
You know?
So they hired this chemist to set up the lab and to start making the meth. He had an interest in fentanyl. He knew what it was, he knew how to make it, so he bought the chemicals and he made fentanyl too, and he showed the cartels that, and they went, oh, that's cool. And so they started making that too. Then the Mexican government cracked down on the ephedrine in Mexico. And 12 or 13, 14 years ago, anyway, suddenly you couldn't get ephedrine in Mexico either. So the chemist guy dug around and he found this old recipe for meth made out of very toxic industrial chemicals that are impossible to control, called P2P. And he began making it out of that. And that's so easy to do, and the chemicals are so easy to get, that now they think there are 300 or 400 independent, not cartel-controlled meth labs in northern Mexico. Thing is, they're not getting all the toxic chemicals out of it.
My friends that I do outreach and go talk to, they'll be smoking meth and falling asleep.
Well, and here's the thing, this new meth, in addition to that, this new meth, the old meth, the two main qualities besides the energy part was that it was a bit euphoric, and it sort of like removed all your doubt and made you feel like what you're doing was exactly what you're supposed to be doing, even if it's like shopping at Walmart at 3 in the morning.
Like, you're talking about the old stuff?
Yeah, the old stuff, the ephedrine stuff, right?
Yeah.
This new stuff, it's not a euphoric, it's a disassociative. So
Cops are coming.
Well, yeah, right, that's it. It's like when you do it, you disassociate, and The psychosis that used to take weeks happens within the first 36 to 72 hours.
They're saying that sometimes it lasts.
Well, that's
after they stop
right,
using.
100%. And the side effects of this meth while you're on it, besides just the paranoia and the psychosis, it causes hoarding. It causes climbing in a cave and not coming out. It causes a fascination with mechanical things, especially bicycle parts. Mm-hmm. And this new meth formulation exactly coincides with the rise of homeless encampments in public.
That's why you see so many bicycle parks.
And 15 years ago, an ounce of meth cost $14,000. Now it costs $1,000. You can get an 8-ball of meth on the street for $20.
Bullshit, man.
And so it's like, so 99% of the homeless population is completely out of their mind on this meth, and they mix fentanyl into it because now it's physically addictive.
Now it's addictive. Yep.
So I gotta do both. And it's like, I kept going, why would you put fentanyl in meth? And it's because it's not what it used to be. It's a completely different drug now. It's not even really meth.
They're all different.
And it's like, and to your point, there's a very successful program, go figure, in Kentucky, where the worst of the opioid epidemic was. Now it's all meth. And like they've got these prison programs that the whole rest of the country, including now Travis County, are trying to institute inside the jails, voluntary units that are just substance use treatment units with accountability amongst the inmates. And you're not ratting on me, you're holding me accountable. And it's being very effective. But what their research has shown is that 6 months minimum inpatient treatment for somebody coming off of that meth before you can even begin to tell how much of it's going to go away. And usually at least a year's worth of structured. And I was having a conversation with somebody who's been in the substance use treatment. She used to work at AR with me. And she's at the sobering center now, about how she used to say nobody wants to donate money to help a 40-year-old homeless crackhead get sober.
Right. For a year. Yeah.
You know, well, period. AR only ever raised money off the women who were bringing their babies in because nobody gave a shit about the adults. They don't. They're not donating money for the adults. And that's still true. You know,
Definitely true.
integral care. Well, we won't get into that. But there's hundreds of millions of dollars sitting in bank accounts to address homelessness. And maybe instead of trying to build treatment for drug addiction, I think I could put together a plan with a little bit of help from somebody who's smarter than me about doing that, and approach somebody and say, you give me $2.5 million a year for 10 years, 12.5 over 10 years, and I can reduce homelessness in Austin by 30% by year 5. Mm-hmm. And they'd go, fucking A, let's do it. And what's the first thing I do? 6-month inpatient treatment. Followed by a year, like I would take one of those hotels that they're trying to put homeless people in, which is basically turning out to be an unstaffed mental hospital.
Dying.
They're
check on them.
I know.
Kicking people out.
Anyway, regardless, then we take that thing they already bought and make it stage 2.
Yeah.
And then we build a third stage that's just like regular sober living once you've been through a year of the 2, you know, and it's freaking expensive. But I think I could, you know, treat.
I bet you could.
Treat several. I think I could treat several hundred people a year for $2.5 million if the city would give me a good lease on a facility. You know, and maybe that's where the shift has to happen. You know, because people will give you money to get those people out of their neighborhoods.
Yeah.
But they don't give a crap how or why they're there or anything else. And bless their hearts, I don't blame them.
Sure.
You know, there are homeless resource centers around town that have blighted the neighborhoods they're in. And their intentions are wonderful. But the reality is they've moved a bunch of meth zombies into a suburban neighborhood where there are no resources to help those people. And they've supported them so they can stay at meth zombies. Like, they don't understand who they're dealing with anymore. 10 or 12 years ago when they started, it was awesome. It's not the same world anymore. And some changes are going to have to be made. And plus, I think the hearts and minds behind Community First Village and behind other homeless resource centers, I think their hearts and minds are in the right place, and they don't understand what's going on. You know, that there's components to it that they're not quite clear on, maybe. I don't know. That gets out of my business.
Don't care about.
Well, and that gets out of my business. Like, I don't want to get into their business and why they're doing what they're doing. it's great that they're trying
done
to.
a lot better, basically.
It's great that they're trying to help, but I think there may be components, because I didn't even know about them until recently, and I'm really in the thick of it. And they're just people who aren't addicts trying their best to help.
Trying to raise some money.
Well, and it is what it is. But I agree. I think if somebody with a little more understanding of who these people are and what's going on with them chemically in their systems, could get involved in the game, it might be able to make longer term change. But
absolutely,
that's the smartest thing I've heard in a long time.
Because literally hundreds of millions of dollars for homelessness. So let's stop talking about addiction. Start talking about homelessness.
That's what we were just talking about. Is like somebody who read a whole bunch of books about addiction and then coming and trying to tell you.
Or homelessness,
Or homelessness.
Right.
We're going to give them a house. Like, that's neat. What about they're like, I even have a problem with the word homeless. And people keep going, it's not homeless, it's unhoused. It's not either. Because if the problem is I had a bunch of medical bills and couldn't pay my rent and got evicted and I'm in my car, there's a fuck ton of resources to get me back into a house pretty quick.
Right.
Those people who are out there on the streets, they're not out there because they're houseless.
Right.
They're out there because they're untreated.
Yeah.
Untreated substance use, untreated mental health issues. They're the untreated, not the unhoused.
Out of the thousands and thousands that I've met and engaged with, I may have met like maybe a dozen that say they're homeless just because of
circumstance or something.
Right. And that's just what they say.
Well, and I don't
know if that's even true.
And the other piece that I have to consider is, and I don't have an example of this or not, but what I do believe is, if I get kicked out of my place to live, and I don't have any resources, and I'm the kind of person who lives a life that's that close to the edge anyway, I may not be organized enough to go find the resources I need to get into a place right away. And if I'm on the streets for very long, somebody's going to give me some meth. And if somebody gives me some, and it lets me disassociate from the pain of not knowing what the fuck to do next, suddenly it's 2 years later and I weigh 120 pounds and I don't even remember where my car is.
Yeah.
So that's a piece of it too. It's like, even the ones who did get homeless out of that circumstance, because they don't know how to access things to quickly change that, and society's not really set up to support that, they can real easily fall in with the people who had serious mental health issues or trauma issues or running away from home for being raped by their dad or for whatever reason.
And I can give you a number. So in the last year, out of 1,800 people, 87 of them were able to be immediately put back into housing after losing their place for a bad circumstance.
Right.
So 87 out of 1,800.
So there you go. That's about what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Those are numbers based on what I was guessing.
Have you talked, like, have you gone to the Capitol or town halls and like trying to talk to somebody?
Not really, not yet. Like,
You're preparing.
well, I forget that I have things to say. My sister-in-law, who is long-term sober, she's the first person I made friends with when I got out of rehab, and now she's married to my brother.
Your sister-in-law? Oh, okay.
My sister-in-law, right?
I thought you meant like your wife's the sister. And
No. My brother's wife.
Okay.
My brother's wife. She's an immigration attorney, and until recently, she was partners with a guy named Chito Vela, who's not her partner anymore because he's a city councilman.
Yeah.
He's also on the board of the Sobering Center. And the city has gotten a huge settlement from the opioid settlement that's coming down. And the mayor turned to the council and, why don't we have any beds? And Chito went, because we let AR close. And so somebody mentioned it to me, and my sister-in-law put me in touch with him, and I met with him once to talk to him about what I think needs to be done, and we haven't followed up yet, but I want to keep trying to talk to him, because there is some will, and I have some institutional knowledge, and there's lots of people that do, and I understand that Laura Elmore, who ran AR when I was there and is running the sobering center now, has applied and I think been approved for some additional money to turn the third floor of the sobering center into, like when I sat down with Cheeto, he said, what would you build? And I said, the first thing would be a 14-day detox and stabilization unit. Everybody goes there.
Don't you think?
And then after the 14-day program, you would build an inpatient treatment program, gender specific, 60 days long for men and women. And then after that, you would have at least a 9-month long program with up to the neck in peer coaches, with job training and social service access and everything else, so that by the time they leave at some point during that, they have a job and their driver's license and social security card, and they're ready to move out into a less structured environment. That's what I would build. Absolutely. And then he said, you realize, do you know Laura Sovine? She's just applied to turn the top floor into a 14-day detox and stabilization, because so many people that come to the sobering center in that moment, they really want a bed, but there aren't any. And if they leave, they won't come back. And she's really keen on doing that. So, well, the first piece of the puzzle is there.
That's awesome.
So how do we do the next part? You know, and I've never been very engaged with the political structure, so I don't know, but we'll see.
Same.
That's awesome.
But I'm gonna have to figure some way to start being engaged in that,
Right.
Because if not, then everything goes to the wrong hands and wrong decisions get made, and
Yeah, and
as many people as there are that genuinely care, there's just as many who are just trying to get a grant and take some money.
well, yeah, but putting aside any opinion about anybody else, I think even if everybody has good intentions, like I'm real good I can walk into places I don't know anything about and look at what they're doing and spot the flaw in their thinking. That's just how my head works. I don't know that I'm real good at running stuff, and I need somebody else's eyes on my ideas, but it's that but they come up with this idea and there's a missing piece and nobody points it out. I'm the guy who constantly, because I know how things are done, will look at it. Like I'll find a product at Goodwill and look at it and go, this went through 5 design iterations and 8 committee meetings, and it was approved and they made 10,000. Look at this piece of shit. Like nowhere along the lines did anybody go, oh my God, that's awful. We just saw a billboard for this ad campaign, and I read it, I was going, what the fuck does that even mean? That went through a bunch of design, and everybody went, yeah, it's awesome. And then I drive past it and I'm pretty bright, and I look at it and go, what the fuck does that even say? Even Mother Nature has an agent. What does that mean? It's baffling to me.
I've seen that one.
Yeah, I don't know either. It's whatever the campaign's trying to do, that one failed. But it's even if I say, and I agree, there's bad actors everywhere, but even with the best of intentions, part of the problem is even the good actors get ego tied up in their plan, and they don't want anybody coming in, because that happened at Community First when AR went over there. We went this giving them houses thing is great, but if you don't get some real serious mental health in here, you don't get some real, but they would send people to treatment, but they would insist that we send them right back into a giant open-air dope market instead of letting them go to sober living. And none of them stayed sober because they didn't want to brook any outside influence on their idea. It has to be their idea. And I get that, but people have to be a little more flexible than that. And eventually we have to work together to figure this out, because it's not going to figure itself out.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
I'm doing what once again, I'm trying to be the 1 in 12. And
Do you have a page where you're posting your video thoughts?
I'm on social media. I can't remember what any of the pages are. You can search for Chris Gates.
Cool Life.
And then bigcoollife.com, that's my website. It's I was a web developer for 10 years, so the site is a piece of crap and I haven't updated it in forever, but that's on my to-do list for the next week or so. So as the new videos start coming out, they will start feeding to the site, and Instagram and TikTok and YouTube and all of it.
Love it.
Just me talking. And then I'm looking for a spot. I'm not 100% sure to do what. I'm looking for a room. I'm talking to Darren at Communities for Recovery, something. I'm looking for a place where once a week, maybe once a month, I don't know, probably once a week, I can hold conversation about where I get to talk about my ideas about spirituality and recovery, and anybody's welcome to come. And it's not an AA meeting, and it's not an NA meeting. So there's no A's in it. It's just this thing.
Bouncing ideas.
Right. Well, it's like, and I talk about my idea for half an hour, and then I answer questions. And it's like, and I don't want to argue with you.
If you're trying to figure out what they're doing.
Because I've been told since I got sober that the way I think about spirituality and the 12 steps and recovery is not like other people. And that I have the ability to talk about it in a way that resonates with a certain portion of the population. And my responsibility, if I'm going to be humble, is to develop that. And I've balked at it for a really long time, but it's time to step out of doing it as a job. Like AR was a gift that was handed to me right after somebody said, what are you going to do with that talent? And then AR was handed to me, and I got to do that for 6 years, and it was awesome. Now it's time for the next thing, and I don't know exactly what it looks like. There's probably going to be some coaching. There's probably going to be some, but in general, I'll figure out how to get paid later. But I'm looking for a place where I can have just say, hey, this is Chris Gates, and I'm doing this talk about spirituality and stuff like that. Come if you want, and it'll either find its legs or it won't. You know?
We'll definitely also invite people to comment on this video.
Yeah,
but I think also the way that you explain things doesn't just resonate with certain addicts. It will be able to resonate with non-addicts. It's so hard to bring them together.
Right. I joked for a long time that I wanted to start a 12-step program that's acronym was UMODA, which is uncomfortable most of the time anonymous.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, I'm just uncomfortable in my skin and I don't know why, nothing I do seems to help and blah, blah, blah. And it's because the thing you're trying to do doesn't fix the thing you're trying to fix. You know, and I can tell you how to fix the thing you're trying to fix, and it's doing stuff that doesn't seem related to it at all, but I promise it works.
I think if you just put one foot in front of the other and just...
And as I get healthy enough to do that, it's like step out doing what I can now. I want to do this hour-long thing. I've begun to go out and tell my story every now and then. And as long as I take care of myself during the day, I can go out in the evening and do that. And remind myself who I am, because it's been 2 years since I really got to talk about this stuff in a meaningful way. Mm-hmm. And so I've kind of forgotten. But I've done it 3 times in the last 2 weeks, and the response is like, oh yeah, I'm doing this because of that. Because somebody goes, oh crap, I never heard that before. Because I was talking to a guy last night who's he's just coming out of his 9th rehab. And I'm going like, I bet every time you relapse, somebody said you just weren't willing. And I bet at least half the time you tried your ass off. And he went, It's because the people weren't showing you what you needed to do. Because they didn't know either. Because nobody showed them. But fortunately for them, they can stay sober and be relatively happy not understanding, but you can't, and I can't. And I don't want to blame them. It's not their fault. They don't know either. But if somebody doesn't tell you, you'll die. And it's simpler than you think. And it doesn't require, like I was in a meeting today, the topic was the 3rd step. And people who are like me and don't really believe in God are still battling with this, turning their will and their life over to the care of God. It's like, yeah, I don't believe in any of that. The power I'm connecting to doesn't have a will. It doesn't have an intention. It doesn't know I exist any more than gravity knows I exist. It's just a power. I don't believe it. I'm necessarily interpreting the right way. It's just what works for me. But I don't turn my will and my life over to anything. I recognize that I have spiritual health, and I have to take that into consideration in every action I take. That's what step 3 is. I have to remember that I have a spiritual health, and I have to consider it in every action I take.
What is spiritual health to you?
Well, that's a good question. I always talk about a gas tank. I like visual images. Like visualize a gas gauge. When the needle's on full, right? I'm in great spiritual health. I'm really connected to this source of power. I'm comfortable in my skin. I'm relaxed. I'm serene. My thinking is clear and slow. My actions are effective. My emotions are in the proper proportion to what's actually happening. If you're wired like me, on a good day with nothing particularly going wrong, I end up at 3/4 of a tank. And
hey,
come on in. Hey, come on in. This is Lee. We're doing a video. You're just doing something with the car?
Car and printing stuff.
Yeah, go ahead. So when the needle's on full, I'm comfortable, my thoughts are effective, my actions are effective, my emotions are in the proper proportion. When the tank gets to 3/4 of a tank, my thinking becomes selfish and self-centered and dishonest and frightened, because now I'm starting to be uncomfortable inside. And everything gets filtered through that. And I'm thinking about me. Fixing me is the number one thing on my to-do list, even if I'm not aware of it. And as the tank continues to drain, and I get to half a tank, now my actions are selfish and self-centered and dishonest and fear-based. Inescapably, because those are the actions of a man in that spiritual condition.
This power source, what have you identified it?
I have it. My relationship to the source of power is the same relationship that a radio has to the radio station. Mm-hmm. Right?
String theory.
Like, just energy.
Right. It's just like, for me, the model is gravity. Mm-hmm. Like, gravity is a power. I don't even like higher. It's a power. And I know that current understanding is it's a warp in space-time, but we're going to call it a power. For this analogy, it's still a power. So it's a power. But I don't have to get gravity to like me so I don't fall down. Right? I don't have to be good so gravity doesn't knock me over. Gravity has rules. And when I learn the rules of gravity and balance, I get to walk around the planet. But it's not playing favorites with skateboarders and gymnasts. They're just using gravity to do something I'm unwilling to learn. My connection to this power is the same. It doesn't have a will or an intention or anything, it just is. But when I connect to it, it fills me up and I get to be at peace. And the actions I take are to remove the impediments both in my thinking and in my actions so that that power can flow through me. And it's like a radio, and I like the analogy of a radio. It's like amazing electronics, nice strong case. But a radio doesn't make music. The music's not hidden in there like an MP3 player. It doesn't make the music. Everybody knows that. Its job isn't to make the music, it's to tune into an invisible signal so music happens. And I was like a radio walking around off the channel for years just going thinking it was normal. And every once in a while I'd accidentally like, la la la, music's happening, I don't know why. And I thought it was the girl or the job or whatever. And I'd try and rearrange shit out here and I couldn't make music again because it was, but really it was because accidentally I did something that made me unselfish and power flowed through and blah, blah, blah.
Do you feel like that has anything tied to do with like what they call the laws of attraction, like the positive energy that you put out to it is what you get back at all?
Okay, I was
tie into that in any way.
What I was thinking about recently is the leap from idea to dogma, right? From discovery to dogma, right? And I was meditating, right? And as I'm meditating, I'm trying to breathe from all the way down here, all the way up and all the way back down. And for a moment, and I've only done a little bit of reading on this, I thought about the chakra thing, right? And the next thought in my head is, see, they took this thing, and I can feel these different places in my body. But then they took this thing and decided, and the sound is yum, and the color is purple. I was going, it just made some shit up. And in order to try to control it, they made some shit up. Sure. And like, because humans like to control things, and so they make some shit up.
Grounding
right.
exercises.
Like the law of attraction, the truth of it is, what you look for, you find. I call it the Honda Accord principle. If you're walking around, you're thinking about it, you want to buy a car, you buy a Honda Accord. Suddenly, there's fucking Honda Accords everywhere you go. Everywhere you go, there's Honda Accords. There are not more Honda Accords than there were before you bought the car. It's just now you have an awareness of Honda Accords. If I'm in good spiritual health, what I see is good stuff. My actions are good. The people who are sick don't want to be around me because they feel bad about themselves when they're around me. And so I tend to, water seeks its own level. Sickness seeks sickness. Health seeks health. And, I'm not manifesting. I'm not whatever. It's people trying to put structure on a simpler model. When I'm healthy, I don't have negative opinions about you if you're not healthy, but I know I don't want to hang out with you because I know how you're likely to act. And I don't want to get mad at you for that. Bless your heart. But I know what it was like to be me when I acted like that. It sucks to be you. But I'm going to go over there because you're going to get you on me in a minute. And it's going to be hard to be me. And I won't be very spiritually healthy anymore. So yeah, I mean.
And then you might start making comments about, I'm talking about myself right now, honestly.
I don't want to have, and like, I don't want to have judgment, but I need discernment.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
See, I love this thinking based on spiritual condition, actions based on thinking, right? Because it explains so much. Like, there are things I did in my addiction that I have a hard time wrapping my head around. They are so not who I am, but they're who I was. And most people have shame and guilt around the things they've done. But if I look at it through this lens, it's like those things that I did were the inescapable actions of me in that spiritual health, not even knowing I had spiritual health.
But you can wrap your head around them now that you know that.
Well, I understand the model, but still some of the things I took, I was like, I cannot believe. I know that was me, and I can't believe that was me. Because it's so far outside of the man I ever wanted to be. But I can let go of that because it was inescapable. But it also means my behavior and my thinking today is a result of my current spiritual health. And if I don't like that, I have tools for that. And if my opinion is that everything is negative and everything sucks and everything's stupid, that's a spiritual issue. That's not true. That's just a spiritual issue. And I've got growth to do. I have to stop being so goddamn afraid of everything because it's fear that's causing that. And, so as I continue to grow, I get more and more free. I want to have discernment about you. I cannot control your behavior. When you show me who you are and where you are spiritually, because I can look at your behavior and guess where you are spiritually right this minute, because I know why I've acted that way. And then I can decide, I can't control you, but I can decide how close to you I want to be. Because if I keep standing near you, eventually I'll get sick too. And the closer I am to you, the more emotionally connected to you I am, the farther away I have to stand. That's why you can't sponsor your friends. And so I have to, when I'm not powerless over people, I decide who I let near me. Most of the chaos in my life was not caused by me, it was allowed by me because of the people who I let into my life. And I had to learn not to do that. And, but I can look at people, I can look at the homeless people and have no judgment. Just go, bless your heart. God, it sucks to be you right now. It's so miserable to be where you are. I'm not going to bring you in my house. Bless your heart, I'm not bringing you in my house. I wish I could help. I don't know what to do, except to try to be one of the 12, and give you hope, maybe, And I don't feel better than or worse than. I'm not being judgmental, but I have to be able to have discernment, otherwise I'm going to invite chaos in.
Well, I mean, it's not, I am friends with a lot of hardcore drug users because I used to hang out with them, and now I'm doing outreach with them, and so I let them inside my vehicles at times, but don't But I know what I would do, and that's why I will put my stuff in the
trunk,
seat.
right? And they're not friends; they're acquaintances. Because friends, I don't worry about my shit.
Right.
Because I don't let you close enough. I have enough firsthand experience with you to know that I don't have to worry about my shit around you. And that's what makes us friends. Mm-hmm. That's where you move from acquaintance to friend. And then eventually you move from friend to close friend. Mm-hmm. And then maybe you move from close friend to intimate partner. Part of the problem in the world, and especially in the recovery community, is we skip from stranger to intimate partner with none of the intervening steps. And they all take time. The only way to move between those is with firsthand experience with each other. And I want to skip all that because you're going to fix me. And that's a whole other talk too.
Oh yeah, well it's a topic that definitely, has to be addressed at some point, which usually is addressed when you're going through the...
Eventually, maybe. Yeah. Honestly, I've been married for 17 years. I've never had an argument with my wife, not one. partially because she has 7 years more than me and she's really good at this, because I'm irritating at times. But it's, you know, and I know other people, but the number of people who have happy, successful, long-term, stable relationships in the recovery community is thin. You know, lots of people having the same 3-year relationship over and over again, or swearing off relationships entirely, which may be the healthiest move for them, but that's not what I wanted. And I had almost no one to show me how to use the tools to get here. But I did find one guy, and that's all it took. You know, and then I've helped 4 or 5 other men use the tools to grow enough to be able to show up for their half of the relationship, you know.
4 or 5?
Yeah, in 24 years. The rest haven't really been interested, or haven't hung out long enough, or haven't...
Be able to show up for their half of the relationship with their intimate...
In order to grow through the process that I went through, to be ready to hold up their end of a committed, serious relationship.
Out of
17 years with no argument.
thousands of people that have crossed your path?
Yeah, 5.
Wow.
Yeah. But out of the thousands of people that crossed my path, only a handful ever stayed with me till they had a year.
Only stood with you?
Only stayed with me as a sponsor until they had a year sober, and much less ever made it past the 4th step.
I didn't know you were talking. I thought you were talking about just people who had.
Not in general, but the ones I've worked
AR
with. No, the ones I've worked with, I have walked 5 of them through this process, and they have serious long-term relationships. Not out of everybody I've ever met. I don't know how the fuck they're doing it. But you know, there's not a ton of people who are super long-term, married, happy, whatever. There's just not a lot.
It takes work.
And if they are, they can't exactly tell you how it happened sometimes. And I can tell you exactly how it happens, because a guy walked me through a very specific process to get from where I was to where I needed to be ready. And I know what it is, you know.
Just in a summary, if you can, what is it?
Well, the first thing you have to understand is that there are 3 levels of spiritual existence, spiritual evolution. The lowest is a state of dependence. Everybody who's brand new sober, and almost everybody in the free world at this point, is living in a state of dependence. That means they are depending on things outside of them going and being a certain way in order for their ability to feel safe and okay, which is why they never feel safe and okay. If you do step work really, really religiously, especially step 10s, eventually you grow you evolve to the place of independence. That's where I'm depending on a connection to spiritual power and my own actions to fill my needs. I'm getting my self-esteem from acting esteemably, not convincing you I'm cool. I'm getting my emotional security from a connection to this power and not trying to control my life. I'm showing up for my pocketbook. I'm clear-eyed about my money instead of hoping for the best. My ambitions are based on being the man I'm supposed to be and not what I think will make me look cool or feel safe. My personal relations, my sex relations are based on what I can give, not what I can get. My pride is based on being who I am and being okay with your opinion of me rather than fooling you into thinking I'm cool. And as I move to that place of independence, then I become ready to date, because I am not interviewing to fill a vacancy. I'm already okay. And then my sponsor had me write down every single quality I want in a partner. Trivial shit like hair color, seemingly important stuff like political taste and movies and music, deal breaker stuff, which for me was like I knew I wanted kids. And then I wrote it all down. And then my next job is to go out, and every time I meet somebody who's interesting, date them without sleeping with them so that I can get to know them well enough to see how much of my list they are. Because nobody's ever 100%. But can I live without the 30% that they're not? You know, I met a woman who was awesome. She was like 90% of my freaking list, but she absolutely didn't want kids. There's no point in going on a 3rd date. There's no point. And every time I go out with somebody, I learn a little bit more about what I want. And every time I go out with somebody, I do more inventory because it's the 3rd date and I'm already thinking about naming the children. Right. You know, and I get sideways and I need her even though I don't need her. I need her. And I grow and I grow and I grow. And gradually I find the person that really fits. And I move to the highest level of spiritual growth, which is interdependence. That's where I can meet spiritual weakness and stay spiritually strong. Because usually if you get sick at me, I get sick back at you. But I have to let my partner be able to have a day when she's in poor spiritual health and not let it make me in poor spiritual health too. Let her go work with her sponsor and show me that she can ride her own ship. Because if I rush over and fix her spiritual problems, I don't give her the space to do it herself, so I never trust her because I think it was because of me. And if I rush over and fix her problems, I also don't give her the space to show me she's not going to fix the problem.
Right.
And I never leave her because I can't stay with somebody who gets sick and makes that my problem. And I learned to stay on my side of the street, and I hold the discomfort that it causes me when my beloved is struggling.
And then you
But
really trust that person.
Yeah, and I love her, and I tell her I'm here for her, and I stay the fuck on my side of the street. And that is hard.
Sure.
I have to evolve to that. And like during the process, I told my sponsor, I met this woman, she was unbelievable. And when I finally got the courage to ask her out, found out she was married. And I went to my sponsor and I said, all the good ones are taken. Every time I meet somebody who's great, she's already in a relationship. And he said, you're right, they are.